As police officers, we need to be prepared and ready when we are responding to calls for that call to go from something simple to something where you could be fighting for your life. If you're a police officer and you're watching this video, I want you to think for a second how many times you've received a call where the call notes say one thing and then you get there and it is something completely different than what was described in the call notes. And just keep that in mind as we go through this incident. So we're gonna watch the video one time through all the way. I'm gonna skip, fast forward the beginning part of it, just because it goes on for quite a while. And then, I'll play the video once they enter the apartment all the way through, and then we'll talk about some stuff, and then I'll give you a real life example from one of my own personal experiences, and we'll talk about it.
Police department! Police department! Put it down! Put it down! Put it down! Put it down! Fire. Step up, medic. We got it. It's barricaded. Police department! Police department!
So off the bat, they had gotten a call to this apartment, and it wasn't very clear what was happening. The female who had called had initially asked for police, and then she changed her mind and just asked for medics, and you could hear there was some sort of disturbance going on in the background. So I'm assuming that police and medics got dispatched to this just as a precaution. That's not really uncommon. It could be a medical call, but because there was a disturbance in the background, they dispatched police as well. And thankfully they did in this situation. But so they get there and it's not entirely clear what's going on. They're trying to knock on the door, and then the officer hears yelling and screaming and a disturbance going on inside. And so that's kind of the first thing I want to touch on with this incident is you could tell the officer had that urgency of wanting to get into that apartment. But honestly, once you hear the fight going on inside the apartment, you don't have time to sit there and try to mess with getting the keys in the door and stuff. It seems like those were keys that the fire department had to act sort of like a master key. And they probably have keys for a lot of apartments, but at that point, you should just be kicking the door in, getting in there. Obviously, check the door handle first and make sure that the door is actually locked. But, it took this guy a little over a minute from the time that he had heard the disturbance to the time that he first tries to start kicking the door. Now, obviously, the first couple times he tries to hit the door, it's not effective. And then you've got the second officer who walks up just all nonchalantly. He's walking up as the shot is fired, and this guy has no sense of urgency. I don't know what he's got going on. You obviously don't want to be super hyped up, but he's almost too calm. There's no sense of urgency in his movements or anything of that nature. So the second thing I want to speak on is just generally how they go about entering this apartment. The door was obviously barricaded. It looks like the guy had put a cooler or something there to make the door harder to open. But when we're talking about a potential assault in progress, potential hostage events. You know, somebody could be shot in the apartment because you had heard a shot go off inside the apartment. That goes from deliberate CQB to dynamic CQB. And so I'm not going to get into all the weeds on the differences there, but to keep it simple, deliberate would be slow, methodical, and dynamic would be fast, hostage rescue style CQB. And so that's what this should be going into it. You don't have time to sit there and pie the threshold and do all the deliberate stuff that you would typically do. Like, you should be trying to get into this apartment as fast as possible. So the first guy goes in and he's trying to figure out where they are, because at that exact moment there wasn't really many sound cues going off, and it looks like it's a 2-bedroom style apartment. So he's trying to figure out where they are. He hears the fight continuing off to his right, so good on him. He rushes towards that threat. He boots that door in and starts to assess what he's got going on. So once he actually starts making contact with the subject, it looks like the subject starts throwing things at him. There was that loud bang sound. I don't think that was a gunshot. I think that was him throwing something at the officer. I can't confirm that, but he eventually gets in there, and I'll slow it down or I'll put a freeze frame up on the screen. But as he's kind of moving past the dresser that is laid down on the side, you can very clearly see there's a gun on the ground. And as he's continuing to approach, the subject is essentially diving on top of that gun like he's grabbing it. So I don't really know what's going through this officer's head, if he just got 2 tunnel visions on the suspect and what he was doing. But the gun wasn't in like a hidden spot. Like, it's very clearly visible even on the body-worn camera. You can very clearly see it sitting there on the ground, and it's within arm's reach to the suspect. So approaching the guy and trying to go hands-on in this instance is probably not the best idea. Either pull back out of the room and use the door frame as concealment. You know, it's not going to be covered. Bullets will whiz right through drywall and doors and frames and stuff. But use it as concealment and give the guy, you know, verbal commands. And if he reaches for the gun, then you got to do what you got to do. But, you know, diving on this guy when there's a gun sitting right next to him, and then obviously he ends up having a knife as well, like, it's not a good idea. And I think it's very clear in this situation why that's not a good idea. So moving over to the second officer's BWC, again, as he's walking up, you know, he very clearly hears the gunshot go off. He calls shots fired on the radio. Like, I don't know what's going through his head to not make him want to push towards that threat. And then additionally, you know, as you can see, officer number 1 still has his gun in his holster. His gun's not even out. You hear a fight inside. You hear a shot being fired. It's not out of the realm of possibility for whoever fired that shot to come running out of that apartment. And so if you're sitting there just kind of nonchalantly trying to figure out how to get into this apartment, and he busts out with the gun and starts shooting at you, now you're behind the curve. So you want to be safe with your gun. You don't want to be flagging your buddy, and we'll get to that in a second, but you don't want to be flagging your buddy. You don't want to have the potential of having a sympathetic reflex and sending it around where you don't want it. So you need to be careful with it. But, you know, at this exact moment where the officer, you know, kind of steps off and lets the other officer come in and start to try to kick the door in, like, this would be a good time to get your gun out and just have it ready in case that door does come open and there is a threat there. So again, not getting into the weeds on CQB principles and concepts. Again, I think in this situation, this should have been a dynamic entry. They should be pushing into this apartment fast and aggressively, but you have to keep the baseline principles in place of CQB. You don't want to be flagging your buddy. You don't want to be giving up space that you don't have to. And, you know, in this exact freeze frame right here, the dude he's not directly flagging his buddy as they're going through the threshold. They're kind of crowding the threshold, but he's very close. And if rounds started firing at this point. There's going to be a lot of movement from both officers, and if the officer whose camera we're watching, if he squeezes one off and at the same time the guy in front of him ducks off to his left because he has that startle reflex, that's a bad day, right? And so again, you know, the first officer in there, he hears the fight continuing, so he drives towards the threats. But the guy who we're watching, again, I don't know, I really, it doesn't make sense to me what's going through his head here, because he sees his partner rushing towards a threat area as a fight is going on, and not only does he just not like push fast and aggressive with him, but he also just flags the absolute shit out of his back for a pretty good moment, and it looks like he's fidgeting with his weapon light, so he's backlighting him now. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's just wild to me. And then yeah, the whole time that the first officer's going in there trying to determine what he's doing, the guy's just flagging the absolute shit out of him the entire time, and he is still just very, very nonchalant about the whole thing until the officer gets taken down, and then he decides to holster his gun and go hands on himself. I don't know which one of these officers ended up getting stabbed. I also don't know which one of them ended up shooting, but I know one of them got stabbed and the suspect was DOA'd on site. Guys, I hope this video helped. If you liked the video, drop a like. If you want to see more content like this, drop a subscribe. Also, go check out some of my other videos. I have breakdowns on other incidents like this. So go check those out for some more perspective on other incidents that I've covered. But with all that being said, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.